After half a month, the entire northern plains was still engulfed in the smoke of war. With battles and pursuits continuing everywhere, a monstrous ancient force that had stood for more than 100,000 years had completely collapsed. Numerous forces rushed in like wolves and tigers, tearing apart and dividing its remains. The divine land was destroyed. The clan was exterminated, and the Wong family, which had ruled the northern plains since the primordial era, had become history. A complicated new situation emerged, with various forces reaching an unspoken agreement to completely wipe out the Wong family. This was the natural law of a new power rising. It had to step over the corpses of the previous hegemon, because leaving surviving descendants behind would create endless trouble in the future. The destruction of an ancient aristocratic family shook the entire northern plains like an earthquake. To ordinary people, it was almost as unbelievable as the destruction of the ancient heavenly court. A force regarded as immortal and everlasting had finally reached its end. And the collapse of such an ancient power left the entire world covered in shock. Even after half a month, people remained deeply shaken. The news spread like a spiritual tsunami across the world, stirring the hearts of countless people. The strength of the Man tribe's cavalry was especially frightening. Tens of thousands of warriors had entered the northern plains and destroyed an ancient aristocratic family. An event rarely seen since the primordial era. The name Yi Fan also spread throughout the 5 regions. After disappearing for 12 years, he had returned to the world, proving that he possessed an astonishing secret. Because only an ancient emperor or a great saint of the human race could normally accomplish something like this. Soon after returning, Yi Fan became enraged and led the Man tribe's army into the northern plains, immediately flattening the Wong family's divine land and destroying an ancient aristocratic family. 12 years earlier, Yi Fan's name and achievements had mainly been known in eastern desolation and parts of central plains. But this battle shocked the entire world. From that day onward, almost every cultivator on the ancient star knew his name, and his feat became an unreachable legend. The various great sects discussed the matter intensely, while the entire world was thrown into turmoil. The terrifying strength of the Man tribe also caused the major forces to tremble, especially the sects of Southern Ridge. They had never expected such a powerful group of ancient barbarian warriors to have been hidden deep within the mountains. Perhaps only the Demon Emperor Palace knew that this terrifying force had never truly disappeared and had secretly survived from ancient times until now. The Wong family's complete foundation remained unknown to the world, but the news that they possessed a saint-level primordial beast ancestor had already spread everywhere. In the post-primordial era, most saints had become legends and were rarely seen, so the survival of such a beast was terrifying. Yet even such a powerful existence had been suppressed by the Man tribe's army, demonstrating just how frightening these warriors were and causing even holy lands possessing extreme Dao weapons to become wary. The upheaval continued, and people everywhere remained focused on the situation. Yi Fan's forceful return and his furious destruction of an ancient aristocratic family caused many young cultivators to become fired with ambition, inspiring them to leave their homes and travel the world in pursuit of their own achievements. In eastern desolation, Yaoguang Holy Sun stood before a massive waterfall, surrounded by 108 divine halos. Even his hair was dyed golden, and his deep eyes gazed toward the northern plains. In the northern region, many ancient royal clans emerged, causing numerous major forces to become uneasy. At the Zhang family, Zhang Yifei, dressed in white and possessing an elegant, refined appearance, stood atop a towering mountain and murmured that Yuan Jiyu might make a move, while Huang Zudao probably would not descend the mountain. In Divine City, a disheveled Taoist wearing a tattered Taoist robe wandered around drunk, repeatedly asking who he was and who the Saint Physique was. The surrounding people quickly retreated in fear after recognizing him as the divine silkworm Taoist. Outside the ancient mine of Taichu, Huo Qizi stood facing the ancient mine for 7 days without entering. In the end, he turned around and left, seemingly merging with heaven and earth before disappearing into the horizon. In Southern Ridge, on a beautiful mountain surrounded by waterfalls, green pines and bamboo, strange rocks, and fragrant flowers, a handsome man dressed in blue sat cross-legged on a cliff and gently played an ancient zither. Birds descended around him as though paying homage, while various immortal flowers bloomed. When the final note fell, a terrifying black hole suddenly appeared in the sky and swallowed the entire mountain. Hua Yunfei calmly declared that he had been waiting for the origin of the saint physique for 20 years and that Yi Fan had finally appeared again. Several thousand miles away, a woman in white sat on a cliff surrounded by 365 golden vortices, each containing a golden divine figure. After a long period of cultivation, she opened her eyes and released two dazzling beams of light that illuminated the surrounding mountains before everything instantly turned to dust. In Central Plains, the Yin-Yang sect was filled with silence and unease as they anticipated a terrifying upheaval. Many disciples trembled in fear after learning that Yi Fan had destroyed an ancient aristocratic family. They worried that if he brought the Man tribe's cavalry to their sect, they would have no way to resist. At the same time, other great sects were sharpening their weapons and preparing to kill Yi Fan. The divine son and divine daughter of the two ancient assassin god dynasties had already entered Southern Ridge, waiting for Yi Fan to appear so they could launch a thunderous assassination. Their successors had always dared to assassinate kings directly, and they remained famous for moving like shadows and killing their targets from the darkness. Deep within Southern Ridge, two vague figures shouted that they would use killing to prove the Tao and achieve immortality. Their terrifying killing intent caused numerous surrounding mountains to collapse into dust before the man and woman separated and disappeared. The Man tribe in Southern Ridge remained largely unchanged. Ancient trees towered into the sky, while dozens of vicious birds circled overhead, creating a scene reminiscent of prehistoric times. Many great sects came to visit during these days, shocked by the battle in the northern plains and hoping to understand the true strength of the Man tribe. The Man tribe usually refused to receive outsiders, but this time they made an exception for distinguished guests from the Ji family of Eastern Desolation. A Man tribe elder explained that the young man had not returned with them because he had chosen to remain in the northern plains and would appear again after some time. Ji Zaiwei asked what he was doing, and the elder explained that Yi Fan was searching for Tu Fei, who had been teleported to the northern plains by the Black Emperor 16 or 17 years earlier and had never been heard from since. Li Haishui was also there, trapped inside a massive block of ice, with black light continuously corroding his body and worsening his injuries. Ji Zaiwei decided to wait there, while Dongfang Man said that Yi Fan would definitely return because he had promised to help him kill Zi Tiandu and avenge his elder brother. Meanwhile, beneath the desolate moonlight and cold winds of the blood-stained grasslands, Yi Fan remained in the northern plains instead of leaving. He traveled together with Yan Yishi and Li Tian, witnessing the final stages of the Great Campaign as armies from various factions continued to enter the northern plains and slaughter their enemies. During the fighting, they also personally eliminated several powerful opponents. Yi Fan was determined to find Tu Fei and wondered where the Black Emperor had ultimately sent him. Pang Bo and the monkey remained missing, with their fates unknown, while bad news concerning other old acquaintances had already spread and still needed to be personally verified. Although no one was currently pursuing them, all of their enemies had now turned their attention toward Yi Fan and were certainly preparing to kill him. Therefore, he was not in a hurry. Finding his old friends required careful planning and a slow search. Under the high moon, the grass on the vast prairie grew higher than a person's head, leaving the region extremely desolate. A lone wolf raised its head and howled mournfully toward the moon. Yi Fan and the others walked across the grasslands, covering a vast distance and visiting numerous ancient sects while observing the customs of the northern plains. Suddenly, a tremendous bell-like sound rang out across the night. They immediately rushed forward and traveled more than 100 miles, where they discovered a magnificent and ancient temple standing in the middle of the endless wilderness. Surrounded by sacred radiance, Yi Fan was surprised because Buddhism from Western Desert had entered the northern plains to spread its teachings countless years ago. He suspected that this might be an ancient Buddhist temple passed down from that era, especially since legend said that one of Amitabha Buddha's 10 great disciples had personally traveled to the northern plains to preach. The ancient temple was majestic, solemn, and sacred, covered by a golden halo even in the darkness of night. The bell that had rung earlier had come from this temple. When Yi Fan and the others pushed open the ancient gate and entered the courtyard, they immediately sensed a powerful and solemn Buddhist force. Then Yi Fan suddenly froze upon entering the Buddhist hall because he saw an extraordinarily beautiful woman whom he knew very well. She smiled beautifully and announced that she, An Miaoyi, would play a zither piece for the distinguished guests who had come from afar beneath the moonlit night. Yi Fan immediately called her name, Miaoyi. However, An Miaoyi smiled and told him that although he knew her, she had already known him long ago. She said that he must be the person she had been waiting for. Her words caused Yi Fan to tremble with an inexplicable feeling. When he asked whether she truly did not know him, she calmly replied that she had known him for a long time. Under the cold moonlight, on a vast and desolate grassland where only the mournful howls of lone wolves could be heard, an ancient temple stood covered in golden radiance, appearing sacred, solemn, majestic, and mysterious. Inside the main hall, beside an ancient candle, An Miaoyi sat cross-legged on a cushion, her jade-like face carrying a gentle smile as her slender fingers lightly plucked the strings of a chin. Producing wondrous melodies, Yi Fan slowly approached, no longer displaying the overwhelming killing aura he had shown during the battle against the Wong family. A massive bell suddenly rang from deep within the ancient temple, its sound spreading hundreds of miles and making the entire grassland tremble. Yi Fan stopped and resisted the powerful sound waves. At the same time, Buddhist radiance rose behind An Miaoyi's head, making her white-clad figure appear even more sacred. With her black hair fluttering and a divine halo protecting her, she looked like a lofty and pure bodhisattva. Yi Fan asked why she pretended not to know him. An Miaoyi replied that more than 10 years had passed, and time was like flowing water. What had passed could never be recovered. Although tears welled up in her eyes, she continued smiling. Yi Fan recalled how, during his most difficult period, when everyone mocked him and believed that the ancient sacred body was doomed to fail because of its curse, An Miaoyi alone firmly believed that he could overcome it. She had even gambled her entire life on him. Yi Fan insisted that he had never changed and wanted to approach her. But the bell rang again, causing the Buddhist radiance behind her to become even more brilliant. An Miaoyi said that time could not be reversed and that once one stepped forward, there was no way back. Yi Fan remembered that after breaking through and overcoming the curse, he had been severely wounded by the great Dao and had little life remaining. At that time, An Miaoyi had traveled everywhere seeking spiritual medicines for him, given him the Buddhist Nirvana Sutra, and even cultivated dual cultivation with him to help heal his injuries. He could never forget what she had done. However, An Miaoyi repeatedly said that she no longer knew him. She explained that the woman who had waited for him for years was her. Yet she was no longer that woman. The former An Miaoyi had ceased to exist, and the woman standing before him no longer knew him. When Yi Fan tried to approach and seize her arm, An Miaoyi plucked the chin again. A tremendous bell rang from deep within the temple, while a vast Buddhist radiance surged behind her, vaguely revealing a compassionate Buddha. A powerful domain blocked Yi Fan's path, forcing him to fight if he wanted to move closer. An Miaoyi said that she had waited there only to meet him once, fulfilling the final wish of the former her. Yi Fan firmly declared that there was only one An Miaoyi in the world and that regardless of who she was now, he would bring her back. He released his golden sacred domain and attacked. An Miaoyi blocked the strike with Buddhist radiance and retreated, appearing like a bodhisattva seated upon a lotus platform. The two soon began fighting inside the temple. Their techniques and secret arts collided violently, with Yi Fan's golden sacred domain clashing against An Miaoyi's boundless Buddhist radiance. The battle was fierce despite neither side intending to kill the other. They eventually left the temple and continued fighting across the vast grassland, then from the sky down to the ground and into a large lake. Li Tian offered to suppress An Miaoyi with a saint weapon, but Yan Yishi stopped him, realizing that Yi Fan would not seriously harm her. After 2 hours of battle, Yi Fan became increasingly astonished by An Miaoyi's strength. It was the first time he had personally witnessed her cultivation, and he discovered that she was already extremely powerful, having touched the threshold of the third secret realm. Dao slashing. Another hour passed. Yi Fan finally increased his strength, using the 6 paths of reincarnation fist, deriving Tai Chi through the battle saint art, and suppressing her with his golden sacred domain. He captured An Miaoyi and imprisoned her within golden light. Yi Fan then extended his powerful divine sense toward her immortal platform, beginning another battle, this time a battle of divine consciousness and the Tao. Within a brilliant miniature world, their divine senses clashed intensely. In the end, Yi Fan descended from the sky and, without injuring An Miaoyi, used his primordial spirit to suppress her divine thoughts. An Miaoyi then softly laughed and called him her little man, saying that he had become increasingly powerful. Yi Fan released her and saw that her eyes were filled with mist, her expression much gentler and more familiar than before. An Miaoyi explained that she had not expected them to meet again and that his deep attachment had created such a powerful force that it had forced her to compromise. When Yi Fan asked who she was, An Miaoyi revealed that she was herself, the part of herself that she had cut away when attempting Dao slashing. Yi Fan finally understood that An Miaoyi had chosen to sever everything connected to him, cutting away that part of herself and erasing all memories and attachments concerning him. She said that he had left and gone to another world without looking back or caring for her. Yi Fan felt bitterness in his heart, remembering An Miaoyi's former determination that if she ever became an emperor, she would sever everyone connected to her and cleanse herself of all the honor and humiliation she had experienced throughout her life. An Miaoyi had now reached the threshold of Dao slashing. She explained that countless cultivators became trapped at this stage and spent their entire lives attempting to overcome it. At this level, 10 years of cultivation or 1,000 years made little difference. One either comprehended the Tao and possessed enough great perseverance to overcome the barrier, or one's entire lifetime would be wasted. Dao slashing meant cutting off the path ahead, severing the cultivator's attachments and thoughts, destroying the foundation of the previous path, and carving out a new Tao. An Miaoyi had chosen to sever her own Tao and everything related to Yi Fan. She explained that if she failed, she would disappear completely. But if she succeeded, then after 10 or 100 years she would enter the third secret realm and everything would begin anew. Yi Fan gently touched her cheek and told her that she could not simply disappear because he had promised to protect her Tao. He vowed to help her succeed and ensure that she at least became a female saint. At that moment, Li Tian complained that there were still 2 living people nearby, along with a child, and told them not to go too far. He released Tongtong, who immediately cried and complained about following Li Tian to cultivate. When Tongtong saw Yi Fan taking An Miaoyi away, he called out to his master. But Li Tian stopped him and told him not to ruin the atmosphere, leaving them to follow behind. Under the cold moonlight, the vast grassland was empty and desolate, with only the wind rustling through the grass. Yi Fan and An Miaoyi walked side by side beneath the moon, slowly crossing the endless prairie. For hundreds of thousands of miles, they saw no one, only an occasional lone wolf looking up at the moon, howling while absorbing moonlight to refine its demon core. Neither of them spoke as they walked, quietly experiencing the peaceful and ethereal atmosphere. There was no longer any sense of distance or coldness between them. At this moment, they seemed completely in harmony. After a long silence, An Miaoyi said that she wanted to return to the western desert. Yi Fan asked whether it would be better for her to stay, but she insisted that her Tao lay in the western desert and that she had to personally walk her path to its end. She refused to rely on Yi Fan to help her break through the third secret realm and said that if even the immortal third transformation, the Tao slaying stage, required his assistance, she would have no qualification to advance further and did not want to become his burden. She told him to wait until his sacred body succeeded and even reached great completion before talking about protecting her Tao. Yi Fan was deeply concerned because the Tao slaying stage was filled with unpredictable dangers. Even the most extraordinary geniuses could encounter accidents, and some ancient human saints had barely survived this stage. The difficulty of the Tao that had to be severed varied from person to person, and extraordinary talent could sometimes become an obstacle rather than an advantage. An Miaoyi remained determined, believing that this stage ultimately had to be experienced personally because it determined her future path. She insisted that her Tao fruit was in the western desert and that Yi Fan should not worry too much. Yi Fan finally said that he would not intervene unless she reached a critical moment. As they continued walking silently beneath the moon, An Miaoyi suddenly asked whether Yi Fan believed he would have a next life. She mentioned that Buddhism taught that everyone had a reincarnation, while Yi Fan questioned whether anyone could truly explain the next life and pointed out that even ancient emperors had never clearly reappeared through reincarnation. An Miaoyi replied that ancient emperors were not ordinary people but beings who had attained enlightenment in a single lifetime. As someone who cultivated both Buddhist and Taoist paths, she explained that Buddhism emphasized the next life while Taoism valued the present life. She felt that the divine spirit within the Tao Palace secret realm was like another version of herself that had already been lost, making her wonder whether another version of herself might exist in a future life. Yi Fan told her not to think too deeply about such matters, but he could not shake the feeling that she might leave and that they might never meet again. They eventually reached a great mountain, something rare on the otherwise flat grassland. Orchids grew along the cliffs, accompanied by beautiful flowers and intoxicating fragrance. An Miaoyi observed that when autumn winds arrived, all the flowers would wither. Yet when spring rain returned, they would bloom again. She suggested that perhaps human beings were the same. Yi Fan immediately asked whether she had sensed something. Her beautiful figure was surrounded by brilliant light, yet she once again seemed distant and ethereal to him. An Miaoyi said that if she truly fell, he should regard her as having simply passed through a beautiful bloom that eventually withered. Yi Fan placed his hand on her shoulder and rejected such words. An Miaoyi comforted him, saying that perhaps 10 lifetimes or countless lifetimes later, she would appear again like a withered flower blooming once more. What mattered was that Yi Fan had to attain enlightenment and survive until that day. Perhaps he would encounter another flower resembling the one he once knew. Yi Fan declared that he would become invincible in this life and shatter all karma and every Buddhist doctrine through his own strength. An Miaoyi praised his ambition and hoped that he would truly become invincible in his era, destroying all entanglements, Buddhist connections, and chaotic karma with a single strike. She then told him not to worry about her and to regard her earlier words as mere rambling. When Yi Fan asked which Tao she had chosen, she answered that although there were countless paths, for each person there were ultimately only 2 choices. Yi Fan asked whether any bodhisattva or Buddhist cultivator had guided her path. Looking toward the western desert, he said that after becoming invincible, he would go there himself, shatter all karma with his fists, and even climb Mount Sumeru. An Miaoyi stopped him from speaking further about the distant future, saying that the future was too far away and that it was better to focus on the present. The two eventually sat on the mountain. Before them was a steaming hot spring, its flowing water forming a pool resembling an immortal lake. Wildflowers of various colors bloomed everywhere nearby, filling the air with fragrance and making the place seem like a fairyland. An Miaoyi stood on the mountaintop and began dancing beneath the moonlight, graceful and ethereal like a fairy from the moon palace. After dancing, she gently descended and told Yi Fan that she had to leave. Yi Fan reached out and stopped her without saying anything, silently looking at her. An Miaoyi smiled, and the two embraced. Half an hour later, An Miaoyi's entire body was radiant, pure, and flawless. She gently turned around and rose into the air. Yi Fan stood and silently watched her, once again feeling that she was becoming extremely distant. A translucent flower petal fell into her hand, making her appear even more otherworldly and remote. Before leaving, An Miaoyi said that flowers would bloom again and people might return, even if the flowers withered. They could still meet again after 10 or countless lifetimes. If Yi Fan could attain enlightenment, perhaps he would meet another flower that he had once known. An Miaoyi then departed, leaving Yi Fan deeply shaken. Her beautiful figure remained forever engraved in his heart.